Oh, Zeke, he frightens me. Did you see the way Charles was looking at us up there? At you more than me, he said. I don't like the way he studies me sometimes. It's not right for a cousin. Then you should tell him straight out, said Zeke. Don't be shy about it. Here, let's see what Mrs. Hastings packed us for lunch. He opened up the picnic basket, and he handed me a boiled egg and some dark bread. And soon we were settled against a rock, our bare feet thrust out in front of us, enjoying both our lunch and the breeze that blew in off the water. At that moment, I wish I could stay there for the rest of my life. So comfortable was I with Zeke, with sand and the sun and the ocean. I could feel my skirt flopping around my legs in the breeze, drawing against my thighs, and cared not at all that Zeke could see my ankles. I was delighted, in fact, and thought of how much Mrs. Hastings would cluck her tongue if she saw me now. How long have you known my cousin Charles? I asked suddenly. I've known the Sparrow family ever since I can remember, Zeke answered. I knew who Charles was if I saw him on the street, but never had much to say to him, or he to me. Then, if you never really knew him, why did you dislike him and warn me, even before I told you how he affected me? His reputation, mostly. What sort of reputation is that? Not the sort his father has, that's certain, he answered, and then Zeke suggested that we share the raspberry tea cake that was in the basket, and soon the afternoon was blissfully whiled away. I lay on the blanket, allowing my dress to finish drying, and Zeke continued fishing, though he caught nothing more. About 3 o'clock, dark clouds appeared far out over the ocean and came rolling in as though riding the waves. We then packed up for the journey home. For a moment, as we packed up the basket, our hands touched. When Zeke brought his ends of the cloth toward mine, they touched again, and next, our lips. This kiss, my very first, was as delicious as any tea cake I had ever tasted, which only made me hunger for more. But Zeke drew away then, and touching my hair, said, Why did you give me a picture of yourself at 10? Why not a likeness of you as you are now? Oh, it was all that I had that would fit the frame, I said, blushing. Someday I'll give you a better one. I'd rather the picture than the frame, he said. Oh, how I wanted in that moment to tell him everything, to bare my soul of all I had seen and heard in the Sparrow House, and yet something stopped me. Only I knew the enormity of what I had done by bringing back the color green against my uncle's wishes. And so we walked home, Zeke giving my hand a squeeze before he sent me inside. And though the clouds brought rain, a drenching summer storm, my heart was filled with the delight of the afternoon, and I dared anyone to destroy it. Either it was the happiness upon my face, or a change in my uncle, I knew not, but after dinner that evening, he said, Judith, how about a game of checkers in the parlor? Oh, but I don't believe I've ever played, I told him. Then I'll teach you, he said with a smile, and then more teasing. I submit that there was a time that you knew no songs, but someone taught you those as well. And so, with Mrs. Hastings fanning herself by the window, I sat with my uncle learning the game of checkers, and it was not long before one of my men was crowned, then another, so that I had 2 kings upon the board. For a girl who has never played, Judith, you were giving me a regular fight, my uncle chuckled. Charles, over on the sofa, watched for a time, and then asked, Have we given up the art of conversation for checkers, then? I'll talk with you, said Mrs. Hastings genially. Tell me, Charles, how would you cure a sleepwalker? I was not at all pleased with this turn in the conversation, but I frowned at the board before me and moved one of my men to the left. A sleepwalker, eh? And what does this sleepwalker do? Asked Charles. That we will know eventually, I wager. But as of yet, she has come down the stairs and played a tune on the piano, said Mrs. Hastings. I knew by the tone in her voice that it was only fond teasing on her part. Yet I could not help but wonder why she brought this up with Charles, and could only guess that it still weighed some upon her mind. That she hoped that each time the subject was aired, she might convince herself that I had been the piano player. Had she herself suspicions that the ghost of Jade Green might be lurking about, or was it mere superstition that made her avoid the subject? Charles, however, glancing only once in my direction, said, "Well, Mrs. Hastings, perhaps the solution is to lock the offender up. After all, she might fall down the stairs and break her neck. She might go to the stove and set the house on fire. Just put her in her room at 9 o'clock each evening, lock the door, and keep the key in your nightdress until 7 the next day." The malice in his words did not escape Mrs. Hastings, for she added quickly, "Oh, that's too drastic a solution, Charles." And she laughed, as though it were all a joke. Uncle Geoffrey then spoke. "Now, Judith, you're not paying attention." I saw I had moved a man in such a way that my uncle jumped 3, capturing them all. At work the next day, I said to Violet, "What do you know of my cousin Charles? You've lived in whispers all your life. What do they say about him around town?" Violet rolled her eyes in the direction of Helene, and I knew that this too was not a topic of conversation to be discussed in the shop. So at noon, once again, when we ate our lunches out on the beach, sharing between us a small box of berries, she said, "If you want the truth about your cousin Charles, ask the ladies." "What ladies?" I said, looking about. Violet gave a laugh. "Oh, you won't see them now, love. They aren't going to be up until 6 in the evening. The ladies of the night." "You mean—" She smiled and nodded her head. "Yes, those are the sorts of ladies your cousin is out with. Why do you think he keeps rooms in town? Why his father would throw him out if he ever brought that sort home with him." "And everyone knows this?" "Almost everyone. But there's nothing to be done about it, is there? I mean, he's a man of 40. He can do what he likes." I almost wished I had not heard what Violet told me, but I asked for gossip, and gossip is what I got. It did not make me feel any more kindly toward my cousin, though. In fact, at the dinner table that evening, I felt a great revulsion toward him, which I was sure he could sense from his chair at the end of the table. "And what has our orphan been up to that she's so quiet this evening?" he asked, feigning friendliness. Was she climbing about on the rocks with her panting beau in pursuit? Was she slithering her naked foot up and down the length of his leg? Was she lying in the waves so that her clothes— "Charles, that's enough!" boomed his father suddenly. "Stop this! I will not stand for this sort of comment at my table." All 3 of us stopped eating, for we had never seen Uncle Geoffrey look quite so angry, his face a deep purple. "If you have accusations to make them boldly, but by God, they had better be of such nature as to warrant our attention. Judith is not a prisoner here. She is allowed both her friends and her freedom. And might I say, sir, you should be the last to impugn on a person's character." I truly expected a loud and lengthy argument to follow. Mrs. Hastings, in fact, got up quickly and made some excuse to attend to in the kitchen. But Charles surprisingly apologized. "What was mere joking was taken far too seriously, and I withdraw all my remarks thus far," he said, and then lifted his wine glass and took a drink. I looked quickly at my cousin's face, but could not tell from his eyes whether he spoke with sincerity or sarcasm. His apology mollified my uncle, however, so that the rest of the meal passed by pleasantly enough. When the apple tart was brought to the table later, we each ate a piece with many a compliment to the cook. Charles had left soon after dinner. "Mrs. Hastings," I said, "it's a warm evening and you're still flushed from cooking dinner. Why don't you and Uncle Geoffrey go out into the garden and let me set the kitchen to rights? I insist upon it." She was still fanning herself, and I could see that my offer appealed to her. "Go," I said again. "The yellow rosebush far back at the gates is in bloom, and you should not miss it." "Then I shall go," Mrs. Hastings replied. "The yellow rose?" inquired my uncle. "Of all the flowers, that's my favorite." And so they went. I rolled up my sleeves and set about washing the pots and pans, rinsing the silver, and taking the unused potatoes and onions down into the root cellar. I was just coming back up when I heard a noise in the kitchen. It was a familiar sound, as though Mrs. Hastings had returned and was starting to make dinner all over again. Was it Charles? I thought. Had he come back and was rummaging about? I got to the top step and stopped, listening. Chop, 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 the noise went. Mrs. Hastings? I called. The sound ceased for a moment. I stepped up into the kitchen and looked about. Out the window, I could see Mrs. Hastings and Uncle Geoffrey enjoying the garden. I glanced to my right, waiting for the sound to begin, and then to my left. Chop, chop, chop. I whirled about as the noise seemed to be coming from the back corner. There on the chopping block was a cleaver, methodically hitting the board, rhythmically chopping. And grasping the cleaver was the ghostly hand.